about 2.5, a little over 2.5, I guess April 2020, I jumped in the seat. But yeah, my background was not tech. My background was retired in 2018 from a 27-year career in the military, and through a weird series of yeah, hard right turn to the surreal, ended up here. So yeah, thanks. I've been working with WITI for a little while now, and really love what they're doing.
Thank you, Jason. Susan, we're going to give you the full introduction in a moment. So why don't we move over to Kim?
Hi, my name is Kim. I'm a software engineer, about 20 years. I'm in data and internal applications, Microsoft stack. I'm actually mostly here as I'm interested in learning more about the cloud and containerization. So, hi.
Thank you, Kim. And Kim is a veteran of many WITI events and a very strong developer. Glad to see you here. And Sheeta, would you like to tell us where you're coming in from, what you do? There's two of you. One of you's on mute. Okay, well, when you get a chance, next up we have Ellen Chu. Ellen, can you tell us where you're coming in from and what you do? Oh, there we go. Okay, never mind. All right. With that said, we will go back to Susan Wu, who generously is sharing her time with us today in the middle of a show and somewhere else. And Susan, I met, I guess, about a year ago. And why don't you tell us what you're doing now and where you are?
So I think when I met you, I was actually at VMware. And so in July this year, I moved over to Google to be part of the Google Cloud Networking, outbound product management. So Google has a model, Google Cloud has a model where there are folks that are in outbound product management, and then there are ones that are in inbound product management. Inbound product management works with the engineers to build the products. Outbound product management takes the work out, but we also have to work with, we also roll up to R&D and do work on things like gather customer requirements, go out on speaking opportunities, and write blogs, technical blogs, and so the whole gamut. So both outbound and inbound product management roll up to R&D. And myself, I've been involved with Kubernetes ever since 2016. Prior to VMware, I was in another Kubernetes SDN company. We're one of the earliest to build the Kubernetes network in. So that's why. Oh, and Sheeta is back. We give her a minute too before I go ahead and start and talk about what I've been involved in Kubernetes networking.
Sure, thanks Susan. And Sheeta, are you there?
Yes, I am, Mark.
Oh, great. Okay, well, can you briefly tell us where you're coming in from and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Anshita Chitmalwar. I am a software manager delivery at Wolters Kluwer. I am from Dallas, Texas, and I just rushed from the stairs to get my lunch, so I'm out of breath. But yeah, I have been in the software business for about 10 years. I started my career as a software developer. I am more into like C# programming and .NET. I have worked on various WPF applications. Along with that, I also have experience in web applications. I have also built the legacy systems into Angular. So that's basically a little bit of my software development experience. When it comes to quality assurance, I have some experience there as well. So mostly I have done black box testing. I have a little bit of experience on automated test suites as well. And yeah, that is pretty much what I did.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for joining.
Yeah. I have some prepared slides, maybe minutes, just to share what we're doing and how we're thinking. And feel free to jump in and tell, let us know, where you are in kind of your journey out. So let me switch to the slide view. Let's see. Okay, show mode. Recently, my colleague and I, we did a session at Open Networking Summit. So one of the concepts probably talk about in other places as well. We talked about what's in Kubernetes networking, and we're trying to attempt to demystify it for enterprises and service providers. So I used to be in VMware, so Madhu and I were responsible for the open source project Antrea, which is now part of the CNCF, is in container networking project inside of CNCF. So even though I left and I'm still in a community member, so we decided to submit talk together. A lot of the folks are in this room are software developers. And so, things are changing in software development. When I was at Sun Microsystems, we were used to building these monolithic systems, and we always felt we were really good when we check in code once a week. And then when I went to Docker, people were laughing at me because they were checking in code every hour. And so, a big culture shock, but that's the reason, because you now break up things into microservices and have these small teams on those specific area, right? So for example, your Uber, if you use an Uber app, there might be like the driver service, the scheduling service, your own payment service, like all of these things could be broken up. And, these teams could actually choose their front end, they could choose their programming language, they can choose their backend, and then you just have the APIs talk to each other, right? So that you can provide connectivity. So a lot of nods, this seems very familiar. But when you do this thing, there's quite a lot of complexity, and a lot of complexity is in terms of connectivity of services and security of the services, and even observability of all these services. I think one of the things I just finished listening to our customer Walmart, and they were talking about back in the day when you were building on-prem, you didn't have to care about latency and you didn't about egress because somebody took care of that for you. Now these dev teams actually now have to care about it. And so if you have to think about in this way, then building applications and using the cloud native patterns and make decisions like, oh, which managed, service do I use, right? That, for which cloud, then these things become important even to the app person, and, able to make sure your app is resilient. Like maybe in a region failure, it should be able to weather those things. So all those things are coming into consideration. And then again, you have to worry about connectivity. Now you have to worry about security as well, because many organizations run like one flat network. Everybody can see everybody. So I was talking to the Spotify engineers. Oh yeah, we're open. We can see everybody. But then, then you need to have some kind of isolation for your project. Not like it's, security in a way that you're avoiding maybe internal security, but it just seems like it's people run into each other like a noisy neighbor. So you have to worry about putting some policies around your projects. So that's the reason why this is another transformation that's happening. And then of course the last is data transformation. Some are moving out of the data center or even consolidating data center. Maybe you don't need as many, or you want to build mega data centers. So these are the trends that we see, and these are pretty common. That we check this with many customers, and these are commonly happening. And so what's happening is, so people are building those microservices, that modular approach, and then they're now looking at observability. Some are even implementing like SLO. Not everybody though, because not everybody has that kind of control of their environment, but they're starting to look into that. And then many of them are actually using more than one cloud. They may not have one application stretch across multiple clouds, but they definitely use more than one cloud. And then some are still using some on-prem. Like if you may have some Hadoop or some analytics, some are still on-prem. And sometimes they want to have some calculation either in the cloud or at the edge. So they're still dealing with that. So this is kind of the landscape. With that changing landscape, obviously there's different functions. So the marriage, I'm at the Gartner conference, so they're talking about teams, building these fusion teams, made up of developers, business analysts, infrastructure and ops types people coming together and trying to solve these solutions as a team. And they build fusion teams, and I see that happening quite. And then the other thing that's happening is there are some developers, they turn to product managers and they build these shared platforms for a lot of developers. So my friend works at Intuit. He works on shared services, and the customers for him are the internal developers at Intuit. So all of this is happening all at once. And so in networking, why do you have to care? Like in the day, you don't, right? Somebody's doing all this for me. But when I mentioned that we're going to cloud, you have to care about all of these things, because these, especially latency, can affect your application. Then the egress costs between the region can affect your operations costs. And then you have to implement encryption. So all these things have to come in. And so we look at it in different ways, right? So there might be the traditional IP layer you might examine. Then there's what we call the data in Google, it's the data plane layer, all the network virtualization, we have all of this actually. So the part, the fiber, so there's fiber in Google's, there's 22 subsea cable, and so there's edge pod. So we care about the global network, which is like the backbone. Then we have the virtualization, which is mainly Google's plane virtualization that includes multiple cloud distributed firewall, LB. So this is actually the division I'm in, the cloud network. Then there's another team that's actually looking at apps, like all the things in the apps and Kubernetes. And so that's in the apps idea area. But you'll see that the gRPC, like the people are using HTTP, HTTPS, yes, but there's a more advanced algorithm for routing and web serving that's coming from gRPC. And then there's the GKE networking, which is application connectivity. I actually also work on that. So the reason is that the people that now care about all of this is beyond the infrastructure owners. There's these platform engineering folks that are getting involved, and then and some of the platform engineering folks, they actually report into R&D, like software development. So I'm going to pause here for a second to see if there's some insights, because any folks have ideas on how this is, or whether this is resonating to them.
I can't speak for anybody else, but I love this level of detail. So thank you.
So in the networking, folks, if you come from traditional networking, the OSI in the middle is something that you're very familiar with. But now adding the application filter. And so this is sort of the modern way of doing this, right? Modernizing the apps, modernizing the network. And then now let's break it down a tiny bit even more, right? This should be familiar with a lot of folks, right? A lot of folks are been involved with operating systems. I've been involved with operating systems too. I was in Sylabs. And then at VMware, I was involved with the container OS called Photon. And of course, there's various flavor hypervisors, Zen, vSphere, and even AWS has its own kind of that virtualization layer that virtualizes the hardware, the switch and the storage. They call that Nitro. So all of this is applicable to the world. In Maya, we have cloud load balancing, both layer 4 and layer 7. And then, all this. Then on the app layer, there's more and more technologies for API putting, API gateways, and then additional services that are coming in that's even on top of the layer. But this is something that people are very familiar. So when you go to kind of transformation, you do want to take into account all of this layers and how they're performing. So that's why more and more customers keep asking for observability across this whole stack. They're even asking for observability below, like that the backbone, because always affecting their application, performance. So most APM tools don't even go this far down, but asking even more and more observability, like below this, below the layer, which you can understand, right? If they're implementing across different regions or different availabilities. I mentioned earlier in the call that in Kubernetes, there's something called container networking. So from, I can't even remember the year, I want to say 2016 or 2017, this has moved to, kind of like off of Kubernetes so that it goes into its own project. And at the last count, there were like, 27 container networking interfaces, but in reality, there's really only a few that the people are really using. So Cilium is the container network interface that's used by all three of the public clouds, Azure, AWS, and Google. Google has a kind of like a derivation of Cilium. We have enhancements, and so we don't use the Cilium straight up. We've spoken at eBPF conference about our, work on Cilium. But basically, the container networking features handle quite a bit, right? These are things that you recognize. IPAM for address management, security in Kubernetes is known as network policies. And so once you define the namespace, everything that is in the same namespace, you put the network policy, then all of them are allowed. Think of network policies as maybe like allow rules. And then if you're not in that namespace, then you're not allowed to talk to something. So that's kind of what's happening there. And then some CNIs are adding intrusion detection and IPS into the CNI functions. And then egress, the natting. So that's another functionality of the CNI. And then some are getting accelerated. So I think some folks are from, background of Martinix and Accelerant. This is happening through the CNI, accelerating the performance. And sometimes you accelerate the performance because you need for maybe 5G workloads and, like latency sensitive, network intensive workloads. And then, of course, observability is very important. They're always looking for observability, being able to trace the flows and being able to push the information into something larger like a Prometheus or Grafana dashboard, so you can see things and have deep visibility into the pod performance. So that's happening on all across the CNIs. I just gave two examples. Cilium is what's being used in Google Cloud. Antrea is also being used in Ant for Windows workloads because Antrea supports Windows workloads. And then with the load balancer, layer 4 load balancer and layer 7 ingress, these are very happening, and some of which is some customers use their own kind of load balancer ingress implementation, and then use it across maybe 3 or 4 different clouds, or you use the one that's on board at the public cloud provider. But all of this is, providing that capability of application, load balancing, and providing that elasticity to your applications, right? So, for example, maybe it's a good thing, but I think Cloudflare reported the same thing. There's been a lot of distributed denial of service attacks. So they would try to flood your front end, and Google has a Cloud Armor product, which is a distributed denial service, and it stopped the largest DDoS attack. But anyway, so this is what's happening. And here I want to talk about a new development between load balancer and container ingress. So before this, when Kubernetes was born, so there was something called Ingress API, which is for layer 7. But what happened is every application owner had could choose their own ingress, which is a bad thing. A good thing is they had choice, but a bad thing is that they every ingress was implemented differently. So even timeouts or even health checks were implemented differently. And so there was not a good way to share the roles, because it was just kind of like one-to-one, service owner to ingress. And in a platform engineering situation, you have platform operations, platform operators, or cluster admins. And so they didn't have a way of working with that, with the ingress API. What happened is there was a need to evolve from that service owner ingress with the so many varying implications to something like this, where you could define gateway class, and that could be the one that, a load balancer. It could be like a, F5 contour or anything that you're using as your load balancer. Then you can let the platform administrator find the case. Then you allow the service owners to control their own namespace. So you could have a namespace 1, maybe name foo, or you could have a namespace 2 that's bar. But you can see that you have different service owners that can now control policies of how their services are routed. So that's kind of interesting. Let me explain more on the popular software development, right? So in a later, but here, let me just explain what the gateway API is. So the gateway API is part of the Kubernetes, is actually part of the networking. And this is an attempt to unify the layer 4 load balancing and 7 routing within Kubernetes. It's really extensible here. And the idea is so that you can define the class and reuse it across the different namespaces, but yet will give control to the service owners so they can control the policies for their space. So let me explain maybe 2 popular use case, right? So for example, in a, if you're a service owner, and you might have 2 versions of a software, and it's just trying to test maybe version 1 of your software or version 2 before you roll to a big, production. So maybe here you could define traffic management policy. 90% of the traffic could go to service store 1, and then 10% of the traffic go to the service store 2. Then once you kind of have all your features tested, and maybe send more of the services and more of the traffic to your new service, would be the service 2. Maybe you redirect 90% of the traffic to the new release, which is store 2. So then this is a way of splitting the traffic, but allowing the service owners to have control. Another one is you might have like a progressive rollout, meaning you might have different services. And so you might, again, assign some service to, to one of them, and to different regions, and then maybe also implement policies maybe that's directed to a certain market. So maybe all of these traffic that's designated for the German market, then it would be directed to the service store German. There's some chat. Let me just check. Let's actually be right back. Okay, so this is a sort of 2 popular use cases, which is traffic splitting and then canary deployment. So incidentally, these were also popular use cases for service mesh deployment. So in the case of a service mesh, then they might have deployed maybe like a sidecar proxy, or they might have deployed a host proxy and to do the same thing. But now we're using this example, it's kind of using a Kubernetes concept to use Kubernetes to manage Kubernetes. So this is using Kubernetes construct, using the Kubernetes API to drive a use case Kubernetes. So this is kind of what I had. And so if you have if you look into any of these things, you can always attend, there's both of these have projects. They have community meetings. The Entree community meetings is every Monday, I think at 6 p.m. And participating in the use case for the gateway API with service mesh, those are the Gamma meetings. They meet every Tuesday, either I think it's 8 a.m. in the morning. It rotates between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. So you can look at the links and you can get involved if you want. It's kind of interesting to get involved in Kubernetes community. So now that I've already switched 3 companies, so I still use the Kubernetes Slack to talk to my friends. But then the craziest thing is many of us went to different places. Then from my original startup with only 50 people, Midokura, there are now 9 people inside of Google from Midokura, and we never more than 50 people. So I was like, what a small world. What a small world. But yeah, thank you for listening. And if there's any questions or any about Google, Google Cloud, but not in general Google, I can help better if you want, if you have them.
Thank you, Susan. I love it. And I wanted, so, question I have, because all this container stuff seems to be moving very fast, right? I think, some of the things that Keith and Tush are working on at Sylabs, then it's now, Singularity framework from our military applications, right? Because now as you're merging these hybrid cloud type environments, I'm sure, security is popping up and new things, right? We always love to make sure our, WITI community of, over 150,000 people are like staying on top. I'd love to hear your insights on where you see some of the growth opportunities, things that we might, I know Golang language as an example, all of a sudden popped up and that's a skill. Any particular advice for everybody?
Yeah, I think some of this is kind of, and this crazy thing is one of the first thing that I get now is, oh, how do I interview for the Google product management job? Apparently there's a series of 5 interviews, and you have to cross all 5, and then there's a hiring committee. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities in cloud. And I think what's very interesting to me is if you realize I was in Solaris, and it's actually a while ago, but I didn't mean an I remember. Oh, I'm ahead of you. I worked on AIX. But anyway, you get the idea. So a lot of folks have gone through this tech evolution. So what I'm saying is cloud is just another one of them, right? So you might have gone from Windows to Linux to containers to, Unix to Linux to virtualization to containers, right? So, and then from on-prem to cloud. So it is a evolution. So I think for everyone, it's good to invest in the fundamental. So I was fortunate. 7 years ago, I landed my very first networking job. I have 0 physical networking experience. Started immediately software-defined networking. So I think there are places like that, junctures that come in and build your fundamentals. If you're strong in storage, start with storage and go to software-defined storage. And then now you have persistent storage in Kubernetes, right? So I think it's like that. Or you might have started with operating system. Then you go from operating system to virtualization to compute instances on AWS. So I think there's room for everyone. And I think if you that's what I'm seeing, that there are ways to, and so with any background, I believe you can get in. So for example, even if you are a mobile developer, my friend was a mobile PHP, my school, he switched to Android, then now React, and the next one he's going to pick up is serverless. Because people are building serverless app. One popular one is ordering coffee with a serverless app. So right. I believe you could come in anywhere if that's what you want to do. Though there are ways, right? So I mentioned joining the community, because sometimes you need to not only build the skills, you need to get to know the people. So yeah. I was fortunate to meet one of the tech leads. My company was involved with Kubernetes in 2016. So I met Tim Hawken, and I call him the father of Kubernetes. Kubernetes networking. He might not call himself the father of Kubernetes networking, but and you know, so some of that, knowing the people and then building up on the skill. I also play around and as a hobbyist 1 year of Golang because I was in VMware and we had 3 certified Kubernetes distribution, and the only way to manipulate is to make the changes in Golang. And I didn't do it myself, but I was to read what the engineers were building. So I did invest 1 year in Golang.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
I think that's probably
No,
the way
that's
to approach it if you are interested.
no, that's great history. Because you know, the same year we started WITI, my mom had the idea for WITI. I started working with Philippe Kahn as he was, you know, building as Borland was just starting to grow, right? So then it was kind of object-oriented programming and you know, all this stuff. And here we are, you know, 30 plus years later, containerization and all these things. And I just feel like there's so much
Containers is not new because Solaris containers, I believe, is 90. Is Solaris 10, so it would be 2005 if I'm not mistaken.
right.
So,
But we're companies, but we're right, but were they using them? Right. It's like the tree that
they
fell in
were.
the woods, right? Yeah, they were.
They
Huh?
were, and I'll tell you why they were not popular. Gen 1 containers was not popular, and in 2005, maybe even earlier, I can't remember, 2004 possibly. It's because you had to create applications in Solaris to run the containers. And so if you were not coding in Unix, then, and back in the day, 2005 timeframe, if you remember servers, it was mainly Windows. When I was working at AMD, the Windows was actually, I want to say like 80% market share, and Linux at the time was 5% market share. And so you get, yeah, so Gen wasn't successful because you had to change application to Solaris or something to Unix. And then HP UX had its own containers. IBM has its own, BSD had JS, right? So you had to write to that operating system. But remember, as I was speaking on the beginning, with the microservices, the small pizza teams can control destiny, right? They can control their front end and the programming language, right? So then it kind of liberated and so if the container could describe all the information that is needed to run that application, then it really liberated, it democratized this thing, right? So now Gen 2, right, is happening.
That's exciting. Yeah, I'd love to hear if anybody else has questions. I could go on, but I'm excited. I'm just excited about this whole space for like growth. And you know what I was going to ask you if no one comes off mute, those 2 communities and links that you pointed out, and we'll make sure they're shared with everybody. Like, how are those meetings? I've sat through some Kubernetes, you know, some meetings from the container space. I wouldn't call them as exciting, you know, right? I mean, we try to, with our community, you know, try to do like a half hour of content, but then put people in breakout rooms and really have a chance to build relationships. Are those sessions you were talking about on Monday? Like, do people get to network and connect, or is it more a speaker?
Yeah, so when I started in Kubernetes in 2015, it was like 10,000 people, and I think people really know each other. Now we're like 200,000. And so there's so many different, what they call SIGs, special interest group. So I think you actually should look through the special interest group and see what you're interested in before just joining something. So like if you're interested in APIs, there's an API group. If you're interested in like massive scalability, there's a large cluster group. So I think first a little bit of kind of self-examination, then join, because a lot of times these community groups are too deep. They assume people have been there for a number of years, and some people and KubeCon, they always talk about 4% of the conference is new people joining. So then they started this newcomers or new track, which is an excellent idea because people want to come in. it's becoming mainstream, right? But in 20 timeframe, it wasn't, and maybe, but now 2022 is already 6 years. I think Kubernetes itself 8 already, and so it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. Then you want to just dive into something, and so you want to kind of look something that that you're interested in. Then in the beginning, you don't have to participate. You might be just watching, listening to them. Good thing about Kubernetes is they have something called a KEP. So meaning like it's hard to, general software development is hard to provide enhancements, but with the KEP, you actually propose enhancements. So even a newcomer actually could propose enhancements. So that's why it's quite interesting. It's not like a community where you have to be there from the beginning and it's hard for new people to join. Not the case. I think I last counted there's over 120 certified distributions, and a lot of them are not from the US actually. So some certified distributions are originated outside the US. I think even half the projects are actually CNCF projects are from Asia. So this is really intriguing. It's actually a global kind of participation, a global community.
Right. That's the time zones. They have to have the different times, right? And Kim, I'd love to hear from you because
I know I saw you nodding a lot, so I
yeah,
wanted
please.
to hear.
I've mostly just been like adjacent to it. The company I was last at, the network admin used this all the time. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's the thing. Since I was nodding because I recognized what it was. I have a amorphous concept of what it means, but mostly I've worked inside the container, like in terms of software. But I was looking at the way that you were describing how they were doing the gateways, and like that was what we were trying to do. But yeah, this is really interesting to me because I've been wondering how it worked for a long time. We use VMware at my company.
You use VMware at your company, okay? Yeah.
Yeah,
very
for
cool.
a lot of different things. And
Oh, okay. One easy way for you to get involved is there's something called vSphere with Tanzu. So with Kubernetes and with vSphere, with I think 85 million vSphere workloads out there. So the vSphere engineers was looking to figure out how to incorporate containers into vSphere. So what they did is they took the Kubernetes control plane and they put that into the vSphere control plane. So starting with V7, you could actually launch containers and fully certified Kubernetes clusters on vSphere. So yeah, so if you're using already vSphere, you probably have access to it. Tell them, hey, I want to launch from clusters, then give me. So instead of asking for, hey, can I have a cluster? You know.
So for me, I've mostly just been software development. Where would be I haven't. The last time I worked in operating systems, I was in college.
Yeah. So when you're testing software, they probably, I don't know if they give you an environment to test your software. So maybe, and I don't know, it is in your companies, they used to give developers VMs. So I used to be in R&D, so they gave me 2 VMs, saw me not using and they took it back from me. They only gave me 1 VM. And then if I needed more, I could ask for a transitional VM for only 15 days. It's like they're hoarding these resources. But now with vSphere, with Tons, you could actually have access to your own clusters for testing. Back in the day, you might have had a server underneath your cubicle. Some people still do, but actually they don't want that because you're using resources, and so it is actually, and you're heating up the environment, so it's probably not a good idea. But yeah, that might be something to do.
I'm so new to the actual like how it works space. So what you were describing was just like I had understood it from a black box concept, but that was, I mean, it's a black box of black boxes, but that actually was really interesting on seeing how it was actually working, because that was what I was missing before I didn't know. But it's like, oh, that's what that is. Because talk about it all the time. So it was really interesting. Thank you very much. Where would I, so if I go to those two groups that you were talking about, and vSphere, where would I get more information on what to learn and how to get more into? I mean, there's so many things open. I'm not even sure where to start.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the Kubernetes SIG information right now. Kubernetes, I found it. It's in the chat. So they have all these what called Kubernetes SIG, like special interest group. And so you can look like which ones you're interested in and then figure out when they meet and then try to get involved with the ones that you're interested in.
And are those
So
SIGs
I
like
did the
within
same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, Susan. Are those SIGs like within ACM, like, or is it more
Um,
independent or Linux Foundation? Or, I know there's a
No,
bunch of-
they're more like
is it just its own
community groups getting together, special interest groups. So like in the beginning, sometimes SIG meeting. So the way they, sometimes if you don't really know something, you could help with the notes, but they do it is they do it very democratically. They use a Google Doc and then each one can contribute your notes. So that's kind of another way to learn too, right? Or you could read other people when they're taking notes. So that's kind of helpful. It's not like, how in corporate they always assign it to someone and it's actually not fair, right? Because when you're taking notes, you can't listen and participate. So that's another way. That's how I started to like Kubernetes SIG. And then when I started also, they used to have, depending on where you live, there's a lot of meetups and Kubernetes days that are now traveling to the different cities. So another way is to try to attend the Kubernetes days. They're happening global, like even in India, Singapore, everywhere. But with COVID, I think a lot of the shut for the last 2 years. But I think they're going to come back up. I think that's where it's happening. And then I think, what city are you in, Kim, in this area?
I'm in the town of, or the city of Carlsbad in northern San Diego County.
Yeah, I think I have a two there. But again, maybe slowing, maybe it's not virtual because of COVID, but again, you can still get involved, right? So thanks, Kim. That was really cool. There's a question from Elizabeth about high school students getting involved. I think when I was in Ubuntu, there courses in college, I think, maybe even how the teachers using open source because then they don't have to pay for the micro license. So a lot of actually high school students and college students are getting involved with open source. So I would be surprised, maybe the teachers are already using this in curriculum. My previous business school, my professor was using OpenStack as part of his curriculum. So yeah, maybe, that might be a way. And then another way is there's a lot of low cost or even free courses on Coursera and Udemy on Kubernetes. And there's even free labs. I can't find it now if I find it. David, I'll work on the sheet and then circulate. There's some really low cost labs. Sometimes it's kind of hard to play around with the lab. That's how I learned Go to the Golang playground. Because you could check it, right? Oh, it didn't run. then if it didn't work, right? So it's like instant gratification. So yeah, let me find the labs and then please circulate to people. I would say we gotta really be aggressive. I think in conferences, especially Kubernetes, there's really only about low percentage of when attendees and diversity speakers. So I think we really need to work on that. Something is not there.
Totally. And I was going to ask about that. Like, WITI's open to everybody, prominently women. We want to make sure we have their back. I worked with Stephen Herod and Mark Fleischman, who's at VMware now, because I was at Transmeta, I was a client of mine. And, I know both of them kind of were early VMware people. Any suggestions? I just want to put it out there, right? Like, we want to use the power of our community to support our members, get them the info, help, create welcoming environments. And then we go to maybe some of these areas that may not be as welcoming, you know, how can we leverage WITI? And then, you know, Sylabs is one of our partner too. And as they go through their growth, we want to make sure that, you know, they have such great cultures and have all different types of people working there. We can make sure we have, you know, a whole build, you know, bullpen for the future to support, make sure our members are on top of things. Yeah, I'd love any insights. And we'll just continue the conversation, right? We
Yeah.
started this monthly and, you know, we're here for you, however you can
Yeah.
use us.
So for that one, David, I suggest you reach out to the CNCF Executive Director, Priyanka Sharma, because there usually is some I think maybe even no charge stations for other foundations. And so, you know, maybe you could exhibit there, right? Because, you know, and get to Priyanka about that. The other thing is every KubeCon, they have scholarships for you to apply. You know, sometimes you're from, you know, you're on your own, or your company's not involved with Kubernetes, but you want to be involved. So then you could apply for a scholarship and get, you know, travel approval for the conference. And sometimes you can't really learn this from a textbook. It's best to learn at a conference. That's why I'm here at Gartner, actually, on the cheap. I'm in the Treasure Island Radisson Hotel, where my colleagues are in the high-end Wynn, right? They're in the Wynn and the Venetian. but hey, you know, I'm on the cheap, but I'm here, right? I get to learn, because you can't really get this from a textbook sometimes.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, if WITI can outreach to CNCF and say, hey, I have, you know, 100,000 members, and, you know, wow, you know, we really need to really get in the hands of more diversity participants, right?
Yeah. No, and I think, right, I think companies, sometimes these DEI departments don't necessarily, that's why we're kind of, that's a whole other conversation. I won't start it
Yeah,
into.
DEI is great. I do believe in it, but sometimes they're too far removed from the
In the day to
business
day,
units
right?
or the
I'm
product.
with you.
Yeah.
I'm with
Yeah,
you.
so it is a little difficult, right? And then they have the hiring goals, which they have to push, and it's very hard too.
Yeah.
And then now resources are getting less and less, and you know, with the inflation, so I see it's going to be harder than next
No,
year.
totally. I think, you know, we just finished the updating the glass ceiling report that we were involved with in the mid 90s. And, you know, I think just as they started in the late 90s in tech, these numbers driven initiatives kind of took it off the rails a little bit. And that's where we're trying to pull everything back and just, you know, make sure we get people upskilled, trained, so we can present opportunities. And yeah, it's been a great education.
Yeah,
Thank
David, I
you.
want to give a shout out to Nabila. Nabila just posted the Cube Labs. I think it's no charge, right? And then,
Yeah,
you know, people can practice and, you know, get involved.
thank you.
I think
Yeah.
so if I were starting my career now, there's probably two areas I would want to get involved. One is Kubernetes. The other one is AI/ML, because the AI/ML workloads are also running in Kubernetes or running on serverless. So like investing areas. And another customer told us the bulk of the workloads, data analytics workloads, are running on Google Cloud. Like, wow, okay, so then there's a nice synergy between data as well as you know, cloud. So some people actually may have a background as a business analyst. Those actually folks can now become involved with cloud. So again, as I mentioned, there's more than one way in.
No, that's exciting. Susan, thank you so much. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, because we do have our climate change, I got a note that we do have our climate change session, and they want to open up, they have to kind of shut down this room to open the next one. I'd encourage everybody to join that if you're available. It should be amazing. Mark, did you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank Susan so much for joining us. Susan and I have been communicating for about a year now, and it's so nice to finally hear the words, and that presentation was awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. And
Yeah,
I
thanks,
also
everyone.
want to encourage everybody for this climate change thing. There's a remarkable speaker happening here who we're going to be hearing a lot from in the future. So I'd encourage you, if you have the time, come visit that at 12.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having me. I'm gonna go, but I did leave my Twitter, and so feel free to try to look me there. And yeah, I'm sure tech is a small world, so I'm sure I'll run into you all somewhere in the next place. So
Totally. No,
excited.
thank you. Jason, any last words?
Okay.
Oh, nothing for me.
Everyone.
Thank you. I was insightful, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a great rest of the conference, everybody. I put the VIP link in to access any other sessions. Bye,
Okay,
everybody.
thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
David. Bye.
Bye.